welcome. It's Thursday, February 18th, and I'm Virginia Amos. And as always, we are talking to the people who make Alexandria such a great place to live and work. A little background about tonight's show. I wanted to use this time as a tee-up for a program that Agenda Alexandria is doing on Monday called Alexandria's City Budget Challenges Under COVID. And I wanted to take it from the perspective of citizen involvement and citizen advocacy during this time. So our guest tonight, as well as one of the panelists on Monday with Agenda Alexandria, is none other than Bill Rosello, a leading citizen advocate for the group Bring Integrity Back to Alexandria. Welcome, Bill.
Great to be here, Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I tell you what, before we dive in, and because I know you are committed to transparency, let's talk about the big announcement that landed last night and has been all over the listservs today.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, I'm going to be running for city council.
Okay.
As a Democrat in the June 8th primary. So very excited to have announced that this week. And yeah, we got a lot of comments last night on our Facebook site. But it was also covered today in the Alexandria Times on page 3, and also ALX Now had a piece this afternoon on it.
Oh, good. So, let's talk a little bit about the road that has gotten you to, because certainly running for city council is the ultimate form of citizen advocacy. And truthfully, a lot of things are going on in the city. It's hard to believe that we're actually now a year into the pandemic. But even before that, you had started working with this group, bringing integrity back to Alexandria. So tell us a little bit how you got started, and first of all, what brought you to Alexandria, and how long have you been with us?
Sure. Well, I've been in Alexandria since 1988. Was married here, raised my 2 children here with my wife, Bonnie. We were married here. Her family is from here as well. Okay. So they've been here since the 60s. So we have long roots in the city at this point. And I really came here because I was getting married to an Alexandrian.
Good reason.
And I've been in the management consulting business since I got out of graduate business school in the 80s. And I had a job in downtown Washington with a big firm, and then I've just been doing that ever since. But what got me interested in city government was actually in my career. I started out working in 2 industries with my original firm that I was with. One was energy, and the other one was state and local government. So I ended up doing consulting projects for 20 state and local governments all around the U.S. and in Canada and Puerto Rico. Included a council of governments and several school districts, Paterson, New Jersey, and Baltimore, city of Baltimore, and troubled school districts that needed help. A couple of school districts here in Virginia as well, and did some work in higher ed as well. But mostly it was city government that got me going. And then in the 90s, I've been doing that for a little bit of time. And the Chamber of Commerce found out about me around the same time David Speck did, and they both asked me to be on the budget committee. So the chamber asked me first, so I represented them for 7 years on the city budget committee. That's really how I got started here in Alexandria.
Well, that's a good start, and I must say you started with the numbers, which can sometimes be pretty hard to crunch. But you also have been involved with this Facebook group that kind of grew out of, I guess, a lot of frustration but
Yes.
has become very active and has certainly been a springboard for a lot of conversation and I would say coalescence around a few specific issues.
Yeah, and I think it's been good for awareness for the average resident too, who hasn't been paying
Mm-hmm.
attention for the last 10 years. I had a period of time over the last 10 where I was so busy with kids and with work that I wasn't really paying attention. And then along came King Street and the road diet there, and I paid attention to that, and I thought, those poor residents there are really getting steamrolled. And but it didn't affect me that much.
Mm-hmm.
I was still really busy and still having kids going through high school and such. So and then along came Seminary Road, and I got involved with it. I live in the Seminary Hill Association territory, but I'm right next to Clover College Park here south of Janney's. And so I actually became kind of an unofficial member of Clover College Park Civic Association and worked very closely with them at first, and then the Seminary Hill people as well, on what we thought was just a silly decision on the part of the city to take an arterial road with 17,000 cars per day and narrow it down to 2 lanes for the purpose of providing alternative forms of mobility, which is the way we talk
Mm-hmm.
now in the city, and particularly for bicyclists. But the road wasn't dangerous. There were no, we ran all the data, all the statistics. We went back 15, 20 years. There were no deaths on that stretch of road. Very few serious accidents. A lot of the accidents were people, driving really fast late at night, like 2 in the morning, running off the road. um, and so it was actually a very safe street already for pedestrians. And what we've seen with the bicycle lanes, and I'm a bicyclist, but what we've seen with the bicycle lanes is hardly anybody's using them. So, which
Mm-hmm.
is what we said was going to happen. So we got upset about that. And then the worst thing about it, frankly, Virginia, was that we felt like the city wasn't being straight with us. They weren't being straight about the facts and figures. And in fact, they were really, they really went to war with us. It was
Hmm.
not so much us going to war with them; they went to war with us, and we had these meetings, and they wouldn't. We'd have 90% of the people saying we don't want it. 200 people in a room on 2 different occasions, and they still wanted to go forward with it. We never really have understood why they wanted to do it,
Mm-hmm.
except that it fits into a broader agenda around urbanism, uh, which is personally I think is a threat to the quality of life in our community. So, it started with Seminary Road, but January last year, we've been going a while on that issue. And I said, there are other issues around the city where we don't think the city's being straight with us, where they are not making a good decision. So, it started with Seminary Road.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, a little feedback.
Yeah.
Uh, but there were other issues we didn't think they were being straight with us. We didn't understand why they were heading in a certain direction.
Mm-hmm.
It was clearly where they were headed was going to be a threat to the quality of life in our neighborhoods, and not just ours in Seminary Hill. This grew citywide, and the Facebook group is citywide. And it's a coalition of people who all across the city, from the West End to Old Town, who feel like some of the decisions that the city is making, some of the paths they're going on, are a threat to the quality of life in their neighborhoods.
So, how many members do you have now? Several thousand.
Yeah, it was funny. We thought we got a few hundred people, and um, and I said to one of the guys tonight, I said, we got 2,200 people. He goes, no, we're close to 2,300 now. So, and what we also find is that the 2,300 probably represents another 1,000 people, because there are, for every member, there's somebody else in the household who's hearing about what they're reading
Right.
on the Facebook. It's a little bit like, like Zebra or any of the other publications, right? That somebody reads it and then they tell someone about it. So particularly if they're in the same household. So we think we're touching a lot of people. The fact that it's continued to grow pretty steadily in membership over the now, I don't know, 2, 3, 17 months, I guess we've been doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm no longer an administrator on the site. I haven't been for quite some time, but but I am active in suggesting, content for posts and providing facts and figures and that sort of thing. And I do comment on other people's posts as well.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
it is certainly points to the current way to advocate, if you will, or to be involved. It's quick, it's easy, and it's kind of right in your face all the time, which
Yeah.
is not a bad thing.
Right.
And I think the immediacy of it is, too, what is important. I know when you're trying to keep up with the news in your community, it's not always that easy. And so to have something that is really paid attention to and is updated on a consistent basis, um, that's a great boon for involvement.
Well, that's right. And our news outlets in town do a great job on really tight budgets. They hardly
Hmm.
have any funding. And so
Yeah.
we're not a news outlet, but we are a place where you can go to hear about what's the latest thing going on in the city that may be threatening or positive about your life in your neighborhood. So
Now, do you all have meetings?
no. No, we're purely a Facebook group. Literally could have been just an alumni group from a school getting together.
Okay.
Um, so we have some rules. The
Good.
biggest rule is we don't do any national politics on the site, and we have somebody who polices that, who is, by the way, very partisan on one side of the
Okay.
political spectrum, who polices it on both sides. He just because he
Good.
knows that what we're trying to do is we're really trying to unify people around making the city better. We're not trying to tear it apart, and so that I think is and we've been criticized for that because some people want to come on and troll around
Mhm.
and stir up trouble. And we knew from our early days with Seminary Road when we were posting on Nextdoor that there are a lot of people who just come on and they don't really want to have honest debate. And you say things like, well, I really respect your opinion, but I just disagree with you. And they come back with, well, I'm projecting onto you that you're this type of person and that you really think this, and your real intent is to do something else. And they start starting to
Right.
profile you as some sort of nasty person. And so, our next door debates kind of devolved into that type of discourse. And I think that's what led the founder of there was a founder, actually an individual, not me, who founded it, led him to do that because there was no place to go to really just have an honest discussion among people who had a similar interest
Hmm.
about their neighborhood without being trolled, and often by being trolled by people who didn't even have an interest in your neighborhood.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah,
Well, I think,
so,
one of the things that you and I talked about offline a little bit was the fact that you really do love the city. You think it's a great place to live. Your kids went through T.C. Williams High School. You're an advocate for public schools.
I am.
You see the goodness in Alexandria,
I
and
do.
that's what you want to move forward. You're not saying this is terrible, it's horrible, we need to redo everything. You want to
Not at
take the
all.
good and build on it, which we really appreciate. So one of the questions that has come in tonight on our live chat is, how do you think that you can tackle some of the issues if you do get on city council?
Well, we're going to have the votes on some of these issues to turn the tide. So the city council has 7 members. Every one of them has one vote. The mayor only has one vote. The mayor by city code and by the Virginia state laws, and we have a council manager form of government. The city
Mm-hmm.
manager is really the chief executive. The mayor. A lot of people think the mayor is the chief executive. No, he's more. It's more ceremonial, and there are a couple of legal things that the mayor has to do on behalf of the council,
Mm-hmm.
and he runs the meeting. He or she runs the meetings, but it's the city manager who sets the council agenda for the meetings and runs the city, and all the department heads report up to to the city manager, which is different from DC, where the mayor, all the department heads report up to the mayor,
Mm-hmm.
and the mayor's not even really involved in legislation. So that's called the strong mayor form of government. So for us here, we to change some things, we need 4 votes. We think there are a couple of city council members who are currently on there who do listen. And one of the things I talk about is the pulse of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a number of council members who have no idea what the pulse of the community is. They really don't. And they don't really care to know what the pulse of the community is, because they have certain things they want to do that are part of broader agendas beyond our community. And what we want to do is get people back onto city council who, to your point, love the city, love what it's been, want to preserve the good things about it, are more than happy to talk about how we take Alexandria forward into the next decade or two with progress and to make it even better. But there are just some things we got to change, and we got to start with the attitude at City Hall, in my mind.
All right. Well, in kind of tying this back into Monday's panel, which really is looking at the city budget through the lens of this past year, what do you see as the big challenges ahead? I mean, obviously, revenues are down from tourism. Retail spaces are hurting. It's a tough time.
Well, it's funny because I'm just looking at something tonight, which I would suggest if anybody, look, the budget document is huge. I wouldn't suggest anybody go through it. There are 2 documents that you can read and really understand what goes on with the budget or with the city's finances. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
One's called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So
Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Okay. Are these online?
Anybody who wants to, really understand what's happening in the city, and it's a much shorter document, and you can skim through it and you can find the things you're looking for much more easily. And the other one is called, and this is in the city budget, it's section 9. It's called the Statement of Estimated Fund Balance. And this is a really interesting one because the fund balance is our rainy day fund. This is our bank account. This is basically the city's savings account. And I just was starting to look at it before tonight's meeting, and I had looked at last year's and some previous years before this. But our savings account balance is projected to go up this year. And then on top of that, if you go through it and you get to get into, I guess it's page 9.7, it shows that the projected revenues for this year in the general fund, and the general fund is what funds most of city operations, police, fire, public works, parks, libraries, all that stuff, health and human services, all in the general fund. And there are other sources of funding that goes to some of those. But the general fund revenues are projected to go up from 744 to 761 million, 17 million higher. Okay, so I'm going to have to dig into that between now and Monday, because we'll be talking about that in more depth. But 2 years ago, we were at 717. Today, we're at 762, and that's the year-end fund balance. The other thing, that's the general fund revenues. That's how much money we took in. So it left me scratching my head. I mean, all of our service economy seems like it, had a tough year, but it's not reflected in these numbers. The other thing about the fund balance is it's gone up, and this is our savings account. It used to run at about $60 to $75 million. So year in, year out, we had $60 to $75 million stashed away. And that money is stashed away for a good purpose, because if you have a pandemic or you have a natural disaster or something like that happens, Old Town gets blown up by a bomb and there's no tourism, just who knows what can happen, right? But that's what it's there for. It's basically self-insurance, right? So 60 to 75 million. Today, it's going, they're projecting it's going to be 153 million. So it's literally doubled. Some of that has to do with, we got to pay off our debt when bonds become due, we got to pay it off. but it's doubled, which means we've been taxing people, taxing our residents, our businesses, and our homeowners and our building of real estate owners of one kind or another to build up this fund to double what it has always been. And I'm not sure why 150 million is now the right number when in 2016 it was 75 million. But in any case, so what I'm getting at is we're very fortunate to live in Alexandria. Everyone who lives here, not everybody here is fortunate. We have 11% of our population that lives in poverty. But it's a good place to live no matter where you are on the economic spectrum because we have a lot of wealth in this community.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of wealth in the community. And that's why we're able to build a savings account or a fund balance that's that big. We have the wealth and we have the willingness to tax it. The question is, are we now overtaxing the community? How much longer? We've gone the last 10 years averaging, if you count real estate tax, okay, what we pay on our property tax, add to that the stormwater fee, and add to that the refuse fee. Take that number. Over the last 10 years, the average increase per year has been 4.5%. Yeah. So out of your pocket as a homeowner, condo owner, townhouse owner, 4.5%. The consumer price index has been about 1.6%. The inflation rate, general inflation rate has been around that. So we've been increasing taxes at 3 times the rate. And the question is, what are we getting for that we didn't, that we weren't getting 10 years ago already? So this is something we're going to have to tackle. I'm not a big budget cutter or anything like that, but I do think people should get good service, really high quality service with a smile from the city government at a reasonable price. And, I think some people think the city's been great at budgeting, but I don't think 3 times the rate of inflation as an annual increase in taxes is very good for anybody, and particularly not our seniors, where Social Security's been increasing at about 1.5%. So,
Well, you made some great points, and I know that the city assessments just came out last week, and
right.
Ours went up significantly. I got calls from some other people on my street going, hey, should I challenge this? What are they going to do? And my guess is that the challenges weren't going to go anywhere this year. But it's an issue, and it makes a big difference for people in a certain age group, in a certain demographic.
Well, we have a lot of seniors. We have a lot of military. We have a lot of government people in town. They're not getting 4.5% pay increases.
That's right.
Okay. Retirees are not getting 1.5%. They're getting 1.5%. Anybody on a pension? We got a lot of people who aren't on pensions. So, it's difficult. And then, you start pricing people out. We talk about affordable housing for people under 60% of the median income here. But we're making it less affordable for everybody, and not just through the price of real estate going up, but also by our tax policy for the last 10, 12 years.
I must say I got tickled in one respect when you were talking about that rainy day fund, because it made me think of my father, who, although not an educated man, was a financial wizard, and it would appall him to have that much money sitting in savings and not doing something.
That's right.
He would.
Well, I'm sure they've got, cities generally have a way of making a little money on their savings, so I know they do that. But the real point is, when $75 million in savings was fine 5 or 6 years ago, why we raised $75 million from the taxpayers? Shouldn't we? It's their money.
Right.
We just took it out of their household and their investments, or whatever they use their money for, their savings accounts, put it in the city's savings account. And that's to me it just seems like an astonishing increase in that rainy day fund. And then to have the actual rainy day come and see revenues went up, I Yeah, so
Yeah, and those rainy days where basements are flooding that haven't ever flooded in 30 years. And you have to wonder.
well, this is a huge hot button issue for me. Having been a consultant to cities, one of the things we used to talk about was you can't defer maintenance on any of your infrastructure, your buildings, your equipment. You gotta manage your motor pool, your fleets, whether it's fire engines, police cars, et cetera, and all the trucks we have in town, garbage trucks, et cetera. You got to manage that. You got to maintain your schools. You got to maintain the systems inside the schools. And and what the city failed, major failure over the last few years, and on the heels of establishing a stormwater fee that we all now pay, they didn't clean out the pipes. And so what you end up with is obstruction in the pipes, wasn't cleaned out in time. We had some big rains. Um, but uh, I believe that those things, we would not have had the flooding in Rosemont and Delray and other places in the city. By the way, that's where you got most of the play, but
Yep,
it
it
also
is.
out in the Dorn area, and there was flooding. Holmes Run area, some people got flooded. But if you maintain, you got to maintain those pipes.
Yep.
And then to come back and say, well, the real problem is we weren't charging you a high enough fee. Uh, so we got to double it. I wrote a letter to the editor in the Times on this that, oh, gee, the answer just happened to be coincidentally on 100% increase.
100% increase.
Now, I've done a lot of analyses over 35 years in management consulting with numbers and spreadsheets. And the answer in my career has never come out to be 100% increase. so I,
I'm
so
not surprised.
I think that whole thing was a ruse, and they're going to vote on it on Tuesday night. I think it's a ruse. I don't think that fee needs to go up like that. And what we've done to the people of Delray and Rosemont is nothing short of negligence in my mind.
I think there are a lot of people that would agree with you. Question in from a friend of mine, Steve Rodenhauer. Where will the money come from to rebuild our crumbling school buildings and build more schools to meet the large student population?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I mean, like I said, we have money. We have a wealthy community, so we don't really have to worry that as much about money. If we were Portsmouth, and I don't know how many of you know Portsmouth, but it's
I
it's
was
a
born
very
there.
it's a very different community than Alexandria, as you know, and it's not a wealthy community. And I'm sure they're going through a real tough time. For us, the issue is not whether we can afford to build the schools. It's we can. I mean, taxes will go up, and the more schools we have to build in a shorter period of time, the more it's going to cost us. But the bigger issue is where do we find the land to put the schools on?
Mm.
And so this idea of urbanism, which leads to greater density, puts tremendous pressure on all the pillars of infrastructure that we have. And we can start with the schools. We don't have the land for schools. And you can't just put up a build. You can't expect every kid to go to school in an office building, which is what we did
Right.
with Ferdinand Day. And you certainly can't do that at the high school level. And we already got the largest high school in Virginia, I think now,
Hmm.
and it's going to be in two buildings, which is better than one, for sure. But we're not going to have the land. The next pillar of infrastructure is our roads. The more people we bring in, and we keep being told they're all going to ride bikes. Well, they're not. 90% of the households in this city today have cars, and they depend on those vehicles for one reason or another. 2/3 of them or more use them to commute to work. And then we got 70,000 people who come from outside of the city, either to come to work here or to drive to work through here. So just putting another 20 or 30,000 people in Alexandria puts pressure on the roads. Then you got a brand new sewer system, and I start to wonder, I hope we have the capacity with that 30,000 people, that we don't end up with the same problem. Now, I haven't looked into that, so I don't want to raise any alarms yet on that. But the stormwater system is clearly an issue. And some of us believe that the reason we're trying to do what we're going to do to destroy Taylor Run and Chinkopin Park down there
Mm.
is for flood control, not for pollution control. So,
Okay. Kathy Bond McAfee is asking, the stormwater fee is not for infrastructure, correct?
well, I think it's supposed to be for infrastructure projects and maintenance, both, and to pay the salaries of the people who not only maintain that system, but also do the planning and oversee the projects for expansion of that system. And there
Okay.
probably is some expansion that's needed. There was a study done a few years ago that stated that. But again, I think the biggest issue was we weren't maintaining.
Okay.
You know.
All
But
right.
yeah, that money is supposed to go to that. I will say that some people down in Delray, there's a neighbor down there, Katie Waynick, who's done some
Mm-hmm.
great analysis on what the stormwater fee money has been used for, and it does call into question what have we been doing with that money.
Well, that another interesting question from Frank Putzu. He says, this one tickles me. Can the city use that 150 million as a source to expand into the mortgage banking business for increased density?
Well, I mean, Frank has a point there. I know Frank, but our housing department now has the appearance, and I know they have good heart. They're trying to do the best they can, and they're trying to take care of the vulnerable populations that we have in the city, which we all should be concerned about. Like I said, there's 11% of us, of our neighbors, are living in poverty today, and we know they're doubling up in apartments. Mother, father,
Yeah.
uh, their kids, and then the mother's sister and her husband and their kids, and they're all in one apartment. So we know that that's going on. But we also see, sometimes, and I've seen this in my work with cities, that sometimes we go a little overboard, and we get into the banking business, we get into the real estate business, we get into the marketing business, and we're seeing some of that out of our housing department, and I think it's got to be questioned at this point. Like I said, I think they're doing a great job. We and I know they're trying to save more than just the people in this city, but we got to get back to having a real discussion about what we're trying to do with affordable housing. I think I think we can address affordable housing in a way that's much more economical and a lot less damaging in terms of density. Um, but the fact is, we got to take care of those people either way, whether
Right.
it's my way or whether it's the current way the city's going about it. We got to do it one way or the other.
I wanted to ask you about the documents that you pointed out that were easy reads rather than the entire budget. Can both of those be found online? Are they on the city website?
Yeah. So the annual report, the comprehensive annual financial report, it's the fiscal year ends at the end of June every year,
Okay.
and then this gets published in October. So the last one came out on Halloween, last day of October 2020, and just has great facts and figures. I mean, if you just spent an hour with it, if everybody who's interested in the city just spent an hour, when it gets too dense, just skip it,
Yeah.
skip a section and go on to the next thing. But you'll have a much better idea of how the city's finances really operate. And then the
Okay.
other one, it's just the fund balance, and that's just an interesting one because I don't think many people know that there's two basic funds we always talk about, right? It's the operating or the general fund,
Mm-hmm.
which is the operating budget. So this is just getting the basic services done around the city, right? And most of our funding goes through there. The sources of money that go in there, sometimes federal money, state money goes in there, but it's our tax money mostly is funding that. And then there's our capital improvement budget. So this is the long-term things that we basically take out a mortgage on to pay for. So if you think about your own household, you have your monthly bills that you mostly pay for out of your paycheck every month, and then you got your mortgage. You don't buy your house with a check. Most
Right.
people don't. Some
No.
people do, most people don't. And so we do the same thing in municipal government. So we buy schools, we buy fire trucks, we buy all kinds of equipment, we buy buildings, we buy, sometimes we buy property. And so we basically issue bonds, which is debt, and we owe that money. We basically it gets lent to us by bondholders. We pay interest on it, and then we pay off the bonds over time. So so there's that. But then we have this fund balance, and that's the funny money. And not that there's anything necessarily funny going on with it right now. It just seems like it's really really high, that savings account. And I was just pointing that out. And it's worth those of us who are either on city council or like to watch what the city does to keep track of that. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Um, Another question for you. What are your thoughts on people serving on commissions and committees that have day jobs with firms that do business with the city?
Yeah. So we had a governor not too long ago got in trouble. Uh, and because we have such lax ethical laws, he essentially got off. So there's a difference between what's legal and what's ethical, I think. And I'm in Allison Silverberg's camp on this when it comes to ethics. I think we need a much higher
Mm-hmm.
standard of ethics in our city, and so I don't like when I see people who have a professional job, particularly when their job involves selling services, being at a company that has business within the city. And recusal is not good enough in my mind when it comes to that,
Mm-hmm.
because you're still around the city talking to everybody in the departments that procure services, and they know exactly where you work. And if they like you, so
Right.
the way of the world is people do business with who they like. And even in government, while there are procurement systems, at the end of the day, it comes down to two suppliers sometimes, and one's going to get the nod over the other. And often it comes down to familiarity and whether they're liked. So I don't like it. There, I think our whole board and commission system needs to be overhauled. We have way too many boards and commissions,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of them. I don't want to get rid of the engagement on the issues of all those boards and commissions, but I think a lot of it could be consolidated. But more importantly, we have unappointed people, or excuse me, unelected people who are appointed to these boards and commissions, often serving on two or three of them, who are unaccountable to anyone in the city. And they don't represent really anyone except who they want to represent. And
Right.
I don't think that's right. And yet what we see is the policies that come out of those boards and commissions and those decisions that come out of there get blessed by the city council, are used by some council members as their justification
Mm-hmm.
for doing what they're doing. Oh, it went through the board. Yeah, but the way the board process worked wasn't really representative of what the community wants.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that happen a little bit from when I was with the Delray Citizens Association, and especially on
Yeah,
land use committee. And you would hear
yeah,
things about, well, the board approved this and the board approved that, and then you're kind of wondering, well, who was on that board, and
exactly.
yeah, and who got them on the board. I've
Right.
always found that a very an interesting process, because sometimes it's just a whispering in somebody's ear. Gosh,
Well,
I'd really like to be on that board.
yeah. Yeah, the Federation of Alexandria Federation of Civic Associations, of which I'm a member, um, they they made a strong request that they get representation on one of the committees called the Alexandria Mobility Planning Advisory Committee, which was there to do the new transportation master plan. So they were able to get that done. John Chapman
Good.
helped us with that,
Oh, good.
and and I got to be the representative. So for the last 14 months, I've been serving on that. And what I found out pretty early on is more than half the committee were avid lifestyle bicyclists. Now, I don't have anything against avid lifestyle bicyclists. I'm a bicyclist myself. I was out yesterday in 35-degree weather, going 20 miles, on the trails. But it's undue influence
Mm-hmm.
on that board because they have an interest, and I have nothing against their interest. The problem is we're not balancing interests, and I'll give you that example because I think that's happening on a lot of boards and commissions, and just in general in our discourse and in our decision making at council, that we're not really balancing interests anymore. It's either one end of the spectrum or the other.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. And I would think too that more transparency around the makeup of those boards. I think it's really important to understand the background and the financial connections, if you will, for the people who do sit on those boards, and whether or not they're doing business with the city, because it does
Yeah,
make
and
a huge difference.
I think they have to be limited as to how long they can stay on it too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Bill, it has certainly been a lively discussion. We've had a great audience watching us, great audience participation, and you're going to have your hands full going forward. But I commend you. Absolutely, running for city council is perhaps one of the most prominent ways you can be a citizen advocate, and it is how things get done. And so from my perspective, I appreciate the fact that you are putting yourself forward and giving the people of Alexandria a choice to either do things differently or not, but they will have a choice. Now, tell us when the primary is.
So the primary is June the 8th.
Okay.
I do believe there'll be early voting, similar to what we had in November. I guess we started voting in September. I can't remember exactly, but I think there'll be some of that, so people will be able to vote early. But that's the Democratic primary. After that, we'll have the November general election. So we do expect that there'll be some Republican candidates running as well. We already know one for mayor.
Good.
Is Miss Catchings, who's going to be running. So yeah, we hope everybody. We do think, frankly, we just circling back to our Facebook group, Bring Integrity Back to Alexandria. I think one of the things we've done is probably help make this election more interesting. There are so many more people who are aware of what's going on in the city and now have an opinion. And like me, probably from 2010 to 2015, where I wasn't really paying attention. Mm-hmm. And they probably weren't paying attention either, maybe not, for the whole decade, but they are now. And so I think there'll be a lot of interest in this election.
Well, I think you're right. I know from my own perspective, it is hard to pay attention 100% of the time because, there's just a lot going on.
There is.
But I think that with the recent things that have just happened within the city, particularly with homeowners, the stormwater issues that have not only affected homeowners once, but have affected them several times. And that's a big hurdle. It's a big hurdle. And as we continue with, I live near Potomac Yard, so, I see buildings going up every single day. And so it's a good time to be interested. I appreciate that your group is bringing these issues to the forefront, and I appreciate that they are keeping national politics out of it, that it's local, and it is to support to support a city that we all love and that we want to continue to live in. So thank you again for being with us. I will remind you that Agenda Alexandria will have their program at 12 noon on Monday. There is no cost for it. You can just go on to the Agenda Alexandria website and sign up. The title is, the forum will be Alexandria's City Budget Changes Under COVID, and Bill Rosello will be one of the panelists. And so it's sure to be a lively discussion. And tune in for that, and we will see you back here next month with another edition of the Virginia Amos Show. And until then, please be the good news in someone's life every day.